Our next participant is Kim Witzak, International Drug Safety Advocate and speaker, serves as consumer representative on the FDA Psychopharmacological, whatever, I can't pronounce these things, Drug Advisory Committee. Ms. Witzak.
Great. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Senator Johnson, for hosting this panel today. I also wish to acknowledge the panelists, especially those who bravely told their stories of great personal harm and tragedy as a direct result of these vaccines. It takes courage, commitment, and a deep desire to show up and speak your truth, especially when many forces don't want the world to see this part of the story. You may be wondering why I care so deeply about this issue. Unfortunately, I know only too well the high price of a failed drug safety system. My journey started 18 years ago. I like to call myself the accidental advocate. I never set out to do this advocacy work. On August 6, 2003, my life forever changed. My husband of almost 10 years was found hanging from the rafters of our garage, dead at age 37. He wasn't depressed, nor did he have a history of depression or any other mental illness. He had just started his dream job as with a startup company and was having difficulty sleeping, which is not uncommon for entrepreneurs. So he went to his doctor and was given the antidepressant Zoloft, off-label for insomnia. 5 weeks later, Woody took his own life. At the time, there were no black box suicide warnings on antidepressants. So it became my mission to educate and help change the label. Almost immediately, my brother-in-law and I started coming out here to DC, meeting with the FDA, Congress, and even helped with the Energy and Commerce subcommittee investigations that ultimately led to congressional hearings. Eventually, we did get black box suicide warnings added in 2004 for kids and 2006 for young adults. To think this was 13 years after the FDA first held hearings on antidepressants and suicide in 1991. How many lives were destroyed and families torn apart before the FDA finally warned about the link between suicide and SSRIs. At one of our first meetings with the heads of FDA, same ones that you are talking about today, we asked why the agency wasn't curious and planning to investigate, especially if someone who had never had depression went on to hang himself. Just like the NTSB investigates after a plane crash. I would have thought the FDA would have wanted to get to the bottom of what was going on. But FDA officials instead told us, oh, these stories, AKA my life, are just anecdotes. They didn't see suicide or suicidality happening in the initial company clinical trials. Initially, I thought this was just an isolated incident with antidepressants. Soon I realized it was a bigger systemic problem with our nation's drug safety system, a system driven by commercial interests and compounded by issues such as lack of transparency, conflict of interest, undue influence, and politics within the FDA and CDC. And then there's just the plain sad fact that most people prefer to talk about the benefits. The benefits of the drugs, the side effects or harms, that's just plain, that's a downer. Ignorance is bliss until you're the one that it impacts. When the state and federal governments began to push this mass vaccination program, I followed the situation with great interest. Trumpeted as safe and effective, the vaccines were positioned as the only way out of this pandemic. If you dared to question the science, the safety, or public narrative, you were censored or labeled as spreading misinformation or called an anti-vaxxer. It is mind-boggling to me when you put a product out in the world, especially one that's been rushed through testing and review, and used by billions around the world, that the FDA and other regulatory agencies wouldn't establish a robust, proactive safety monitoring program as part of the rollout. It's frightening to think that the FDA may not have an army of clinicians reading through the hundreds of thousands of reports into VAERS, or even responding to all of you that took your time to reach out to them. As a member of another FDA advisory committee, I can tell you that almost every new drug that we are reviewing in the recent years has come to us using a fast tracking mechanism, much like the EUA track of the vaccines. The FDA priority is to approve drugs and get them on the market quickly with limited trial data. Safety is usually considered after the fact. During PDUFA negotiations, I have long advocated for an independent safety review and monitoring board. The people who approve the drugs and vaccines should not be the same people who are responsible for monitoring safety. The FAA does not investigate plane crashes, the NTSB does. The world of drugs and vaccines needs an NTSB. Finally, I want to briefly touch on mandates that are affecting all of our lives. This is not a red or a blue issue. This is a human rights issue. Where there is risk, there must also be choice. There's a dark irony in that the current era of patient-centered care and shared decision-making, neither patient-centered care nor shared decision-making are present in the conversations around vaccines and mandates. People should not be coerced or bribed to choose between their freedom to bodily autonomy or their livelihood and being injected. This is a human rights, social justice issue. Public health may be a population-based approach, but we need to remember we are treating individuals, and a one-size-fits-all does not always work. People dismiss harms as rare. Well, when you're the person who is harmed, it is your 100%. It is your reality. Unfortunately, I hear from people every day that learned this the hard way. They wish they knew of the potential risks before their lives were forever altered. No one should ever have to ask after the fact, how come I didn't know? We are not anecdotes. And I just want to say, I want to know where the mainstream media is. I want to know where FDA is. I want to know where government agencies. It is horrible listening to these stories, and they should be on record for not being here. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Witzak. Our final presenter is via video, Iona Heath. She's a retired general practitioner from Kentish Town in London.
I'm Iona Heath. I worked as a primary care physician in a deprived part of North London for almost 35 years. And from 2009 to 2012, I was president of the Royal College of General Practitioners in the UK. I'm 71 years old, and I was grateful to have been double vaccinated against COVID-19. I have 4 grandchildren, aged between 10 and 14. Every working day in primary care, I have seen how the theories of medicine work themselves out in the lives of individuals and families. And this experience has reminded me repeatedly of the provisional nature of knowledge. As time goes by, theories, knowledge, and certainty all come and go. A new drug that is greeted as a miracle is condemned as a poison a few months or years later. None of us can be certain about what the future will bring. I have long thought that one of the most important roles of a primary care physician is to protect patients from the harms of medicine. Because we are committed to seeing and hearing each person in the fullness of their context and biography, and we know that the body is not a machine. And because we work at the front line of medicine, at the point where science and life experience intersect. Medicine becomes dangerous whenever the lives, contexts, hopes, and priorities of individual patients are lost from view. Whenever healthcare becomes depersonalized by public health utilitarianism on the macro scale and/or by biomedical science on the micro scale. Many of the people we have heard from today have been squeezed between both these modes of depersonalization. Their individuality has been lost from view and their experience has been discounted. Listening to their stories, I have been powerfully reminded of a paper written by David Sackett 20 years ago, which had a very striking title, The Arrogance of Preventive Medicine. In it, he wrote, "Preventive medicine displays all three elements of arrogance. First, it is aggressively assertive, pursuing symptomless individuals and telling them what they must do to remain healthy. Occasionally invoking force of law, immunization, seatbelts, it prescribes and proscribes for both individual patients and the general citizenry of every age and stage. Second, preventive medicine is presumptuous, confident that the interventions it espouses will, on average, do more good than harm to those who accept and adhere to them. Finally, preventive medicine is overbearing, attacking those who question the value of its recommendations." End of quote. I'm confident that you can see why I thought of this paper by someone who has been described as the father of evidence-based medicine. Extraordinary things seem to happen to people in power, and they begin to believe that fear can only be contained by absolute certainty, very much along the lines of, accept this wonder vaccine, it will stop you dying and it will do you no harm, or only harm of the most trivial nature. But people are not stupid. They know full well that life and death are full of uncertainty, and they also know that fear is contained not by certainty, but by trust. It is a tragedy for all of us that the devastations of the current pandemic have come just at the time when the extent of corruption within the medical industrial complex by powerful vested and financial interests has become undeniable and has made trust very hard to come by. All those who have suffered harm from vaccines, all the children for whom the risks seem to outweigh benefit, and all those whose livelihood and social interconnectedness are threatened by vaccine mandates are being asked to pay too high a price for the false certainty of those who think that they can predict the future. When British playwright Harold Pinter won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2005, he said this, quote, "I believe that despite the enormous odds which exist, unflinching, unswerving, fierce intellectual determination as citizens to define the real truth of our lives and our societies is a crucial obligation which devolves upon us all. I think that this is what we have been trying to do today, and I thank you all."
I gave Dr. Heath a little short shrift here. Not only is she just a retired general practitioner, she's the former president of one of the most prestigious professional societies in the United Kingdom. And I thought that was a pretty good summary of what we try to accomplish here today. Again, I want to thank everybody for participating, particularly those of you who have suffered the injuries from the vaccine. I know this is arduous. I know this is tough for you to travel, but I appreciate it. I do want to point out for anybody watching this via video, even here in the hall, even though these individuals look pretty normal, these injuries are severe. The inner vibrations that some of these people are experiencing are so severe. I just quick to ask Bree. She personally knows 7 people who have committed suicide because the inner vibrations, their symptoms were so severe they just simply could not go on with life. She knows another 15 people who have committed suicide from other members of their group. So again, the injuries don't necessarily have to be visible to be real, to be severe, to be life-altering. It is, again, unfortunate way more than unfortunate. It's actually outrageous that our healthcare agencies, the President of the United States, members of his administration are completely ignoring these people and their plight. The courage it takes to come forward, I can testify too. The repercussions are quite grave. The vilification, the suppression of what you're trying to say, the censorship. People who have been on this journey with me have been fired from their institutions. They've been sued. Their careers and their lives, if they've known it, have been ended. So that's why you have so very few people that are willing to come forward. Their medical license are threatened. The profession that they trained for decades to get good at could be taken away from them. So you understand why they're remaining silent. But I would say one of the biggest impediments to further progress on this is just the basic human tendency to never admit you're wrong. President Biden won't admit he's wrong when he says that this is a pandemic of the unvaxxed, that if you get the vaccine, all is going to be well. The heads of these agencies will never admit they were wrong. My colleagues who voted for the vaccines, who have done videos encouraging everybody to get vaccinated, which, by the way, that might be the right advice for certain people. They don't want to admit they're wrong. Doctors, physicians who have recommended to patients to get the vaccine don't want to admit that their recommendation might have caused a severe harm. It's understandable. I understand that human tendency. But that doesn't overcome the basic humanity of acknowledging reality and doing everything we can as a society. Those of us that voted for Operation Warp Speed, those of us that encouraged vaccination, we have to admit there's a side effect here, and it's changed people's lives forever. So again, I'm begging anybody watching this today or via video, first of all, share the video. Share with every contact you have. Let these stories be seen, let these stories be heard, let them be believed so that as society, we can do the right thing. We can acknowledge it. We can put even just a fraction of the time and effort and resources as we've put into the shutdowns and the mask mandates and the vaccine mandates and the vaccine development and the administration of it. If we just take a fraction of that and apply it to research and treatment, and by the way, a vaccine injury fund that actually compensates those who did what everybody asked them to do, for them themselves, for the good of their neighbors, for the good of society. The least we can do with the trillions of dollars we've already allocated and spent, the least we can do is acknowledge their pain, help them recover, and compensate them for their injuries. So again, I just want to thank everything for being here. God bless all of you. We all wish you well. And that ends our event.